I do want to be very clear, though, our public health experts do not expect to see the kind of widespread outbreaks of Zika here that we've seen in Brazil or in Puerto Rico. The kind of mosquitoes that are most likely to carry Zika are limited to certain regions of our country. But we cannot be complacent because we do expect to see more Zika cases. And even though the symptoms for most people are mild, many may never even know that they have it. We've seen that the complications for pregnant women and their babies can be severe. So I, again, want to encourage every American to learn what they can do to help stop Zika by going to cdc.gov. In addition, Congress needs to do its job. Fighting Zika costs money. Helping Puerto Rico deal with its Zika crisis costs money. Research into new vaccines and, by the way, NIH just announced the first clinical trials in humans that costs money. And that's why my administration proposed an urgent request for more funding back in February. Not only did the Republican-led Congress not pass our request, they worked to cut it. And then they left for summer recess without passing any new funds for the fight against Zika. Meanwhile, our experts at the NIH and CDC, the folks on the front lines, have been doing their best and making do by moving funds from other areas. But now the money that we need to fight Zika is rapidly running out. The situation is getting critical. For instance, without sufficient funding, NIH critical trials, clinical trials, and the possibilities of a vaccine which is well within reach could be delayed. So this is not the time for politics. More than 40 U.S. service members have now contracted Zika overseas. In 50 U.S. states. We know of more than 1,800 cases of Zika connected to travel to infected areas, and that includes nearly 500 pregnant women. Zika is now present in almost every part of Puerto Rico. And now we have the first local transmission in Florida, and there will certainly be more. And meanwhile, Congress is on a summer recess. A lot of folks talk about protecting Americans from threats. Well, Zika is a serious threat to Americans, especially babies right now. So, once again, I want to urge the American people to call their members of Congress and tell them to do their job. Deal with this threat, help protect the American people from Zika. With that, I'm going to take some questions. I'm going to start with someone who just assumed the second most powerful office in the land. Jeff Mason, the new Correspondents Association president, also from Reuters. Jeff. Question, thank you, sir. Hardly powerful. And happy birthday. President Obama, thank you very much. Question, as Islamic State loses territory. You and other officials have said that it is becoming a more traditional terrorist group. Are you satisfied that the United States and its allies have shifted strategy sufficiently to address that change? And secondly, given your comments this week about Donald Trump's volatility and lack of fitness to be president. Are you concerned that he will be receiving security briefings about ISIS and other sensitive national security issues? President Obama, I'm never satisfied with our response. Because if you're satisfied, that means the problem is solved, and it's not. So we just spent a couple hours meeting with my top national security folks to look at what more can be done. It is absolutely necessary for us to defeat ISIL in Iraq and Syria. It is not sufficient, but it is necessary. Because so long as they have those bases, they can use their propaganda to suggest that somehow there's still some caliphate being born, and that can insinuate itself then in the minds of folks who may be willing to travel there or carry out terrorist attacks. It's also destabilizing for countries in the region at a time when the region is already unstable. So I am pleased with the progress that we've made on the ground in Iraq and Syria. We're far from freeing Mosul and Raqqa. But what we've shown is that when it comes to conventional fights, ISIL can be beaten with partners on the ground so long as they've got the support from coalition forces that we've been providing. In the meantime, though, you're seeing ISIL carry out external terrorist acts, and they've learned something. They've adapted from Al-Qaeda. Which had a much more centralized operation and tried to plan very elaborate attacks. And what ISIL has figured out is that if they can convince a handful of people, or even one person, To carry out an attack on a subway or at a parade or some other public venue and kill scores of people. As opposed to thousands of people, it still creates the kinds of fear and concern that elevates their profile. So, in some ways, rooting out these networks for smaller, less complicated attacks is tougher. Because it doesn't require as many resources on their part or preparation. But it does mean that we've got to do even more to generate the intelligence. And to work with our partners in order to degrade those networks. And the fact is that those networks will probably sustain. Themselves even after ISIL is defeated in Raqqa and Mosul. But what we've learned from our efforts to defeat Al-Qaeda is that if we stay on it, our intelligence gets better, and we adapt as well. And eventually, we will dismantle these networks also. This is part of the reason why, however, it is so important for us to keep our eye on the ball and not panic, not succumb to fear. Because ISIL can't defeat the United States of America or our NATO partners. We can defeat ourselves, though, if we make bad decisions. And we have to understand that as painful and as tragic as these attacks are, that we are going to keep on grinding away. Preventing them wherever we can, using a whole of government effort to knock down their propaganda. To disrupt their networks, to take their key operatives off the battlefield, and that eventually we will win. But if we start making bad decisions indiscriminately killing civilians, For example, in some of these areas, instituting offensive religious tests on who can enter the country, those kinds of strategies can end up backfiring. Because in order for us to ultimately win this fight, we cannot frame this as a clash of civilizations between the West and Islam. That plays exactly into the hands of ISIL and the perversions. The perverse interpretations of Islam that they're putting forward. As far as Mr. Trump, we are going to go by the law, which is that in both tradition and the law that if somebody is the nominee, the Republican nominee for president, they need to get a security briefing so that if they were to win, they are not starting from scratch in terms of being prepared for this office. And I'm not going to go into details of the nature of the security briefings that both candidates receive. What I will say is that they have been told these are classified briefings. And if they want to be president, they got to start acting like president. And that means being able to receive these briefings and not spread them around. Question: are you worried about that? President Obama: well, I think I've said enough on that. Mary Bruce. Question: thank you, Mr. President. What is your response to critics who say the $400 million in cash that you sent to Iran was a ransom payment? Was it really, simply a pure coincidence that a sum that was a payment that was held up for almost 4 decades was suddenly sent at the exact same time that the American prisoners were released. And can you assure the American people that none of that money went to support terrorism? President Obama, okay. It's been interesting to watch the story surface. Some of you may recall we announced these payments in January many months ago. There wasn't a secret. We announced them to all of you. Josh did a briefing on them. This wasn't some nefarious deal. And at the time we explained that Iran had pressed a claim before an international tribunal about them recovering money of theirs that we had frozen, that, as a consequence of its working its way through the international tribunal. It was the assessment of our lawyers that we were now at a point where there was significant litigation risk and we could end up costing ourselves billions of dollars. It was their advice and suggestion that we settle. And that's what these payments represent. And it wasn't. A secret. We were completely open with everybody about it. And it's interesting to me how suddenly this became a story again. That's point number 1. Point number 2, we do not pay ransom for hostages. We've got a number of Americans being held all around the world. And I meet with their families, and it is heartbreaking. And we have stood up an entire section of interagency experts who devote all their time to working with these families to get these Americans out.